Well, I would say welcome back to another episode of Moms Moving On, but actually, welcome to the first episode of our newly rebranded podcast, the one that has been ranked in the top 1% globally since like 2020, formerly known as Moms Moving On, now known as the Moving On Method. I'm so excited to have made this change because the Moving On Method, for those of you who don't know, is the program I developed to train and certify prospective divorce coaches and implements a type of coaching that gives parents the ability to give their children a type of co-parented experience they won't need to heal from. We've been trademarked since the beginning of 2024, and I thought, you know what? Why not up the ante here and match the podcast to the method? So welcome. Jess is alongside me today. You know, Jess is my right-hand lady and all things moving on. Thanks for being here with me, Jess.
Thanks so much for having me. This is such an exciting rebrand. I feel like so many lives have been changed through the Moving On method. So I'm excited to kind of take the next step with the podcast.
Yeah, and I think, the question would be like, well, what's going to be different? Nothing other than the name. Um, I realized after, I think the last 2 years, we've had a lot of more male clients,
Mhm.
more couples showing up to want to work together in terms of like how to best help their kids. And the mom's part was a bit polarizing, though my focus is always going to be to help moms as much as I
Right.
can. The method is really applicable to anybody who is trying to help their kids get through the divorce process.
No, I totally agree. And I feel like, we've had so many couples, like you said, reach out recently in the last year and a half. And I think for so long, people think like if you hire a divorce coach or a co-parenting coach, it's just for one person. But working with couples is so beautiful because you get both people in the room. And then as coaches, we kind of serve as that neutral party to really focus on what are the best needs of the children throughout this process. And it really helps them up for co-parenting success in the long run.
Yeah. And I have seen like the best part of that. And I think people should know like it is not a prerequisite for good co-parenting to be able to like sit down together with your spouse or your soon to be ex-spouse and a coach. It's
Mhm.
probably more uncommon than it is common, but even if I only
Right.
meet with the soon to be ex-husband once in a series of sessions with the ex-wife, we can focus on a parenting plan. So that's been like a really big thing that I've been doing with my clients is like, you can't figure out this parenting plan. You're arguing, trying to figure out every little thing. Let me come in and help like explain it to you
Mhm.
from a child first perspective and why
Right.
not getting stuck on pick up and drop off time is important because what matters is like, are we making these transition times at the best time for little Johnny versus, looking at this like a plan for somebody we don't even know.
Totally. And I think that that aspect and that approach to things is so important. And I know that I've also seen when working with couples is, they can disagree on so many things in their relationship and how they were treated. But I've sat down with couples before and the dad will say, you know what? She is like the most amazing mom. She always puts her kids first. And the same goes for dad. And we kind of build on those little things, right? Your feelings are valid for how they treated you as a spouse, but we're going to focus on the children and how they were as a parent in the relationship versus how they were as a husband or a wife.
Well, yeah, it's like I always say in our moving on method trainings, when you're a coach working with a new client, they're going to come to the table with everything they hate about their soon to be ex, all of their most negative qualities, whatever personality disorder so and so's Instagram account decided your ex has. But the second I say, well, tell me how your kids feel about your ex. They soften, the emotions like level out a little bit. And it's like, oh, okay.
Mhm.
It's a reminder of like, we could hate each other, but we still have this commonality that we love and would do anything for.
Right. And I think more times than not, that when you're working with couples or even individuals, they're focus is really on how can we help our children through this process? How can we, set them up for success, like you say in the moving on method, so we give them a co-parented childhood experience that they don't need to recover from down the road.
Right. And like, I mean, I tell all my clients, kids, like, like we all get to adulthood and we resent our parents for something.
Sure.
Maybe it was, I don't know, the way my mom's relationship was with her body and food that I really resent having to grow up around that because of the issues it caused for
Mhm.
me. But everyone's going to have something, but don't let it be the divorce because we know the trauma associated with conflict after divorce leads to patterns and relationship
Right.
issues in adulthood and even emotional mental illness. I mean, those things can be avoided if we just focus
Mhm.
on the big picture. So I don't know. I'm loving that we've changed the name, and I'm loving that this really has become a method. Like we've trained so many divorce coaches now. We're coming up on our 12th training, and not a majority, but I would
Mhm.
say probably about half of our trainees end up reaching out and saying, you know what, like I'm not ready to get started on coaching yet, but this has changed my way of co-parenting with my ex, or it has changed my perception of
Right.
what's important in my co-parenting relationship.
Yeah, I think, we hear that feedback so often when we are doing these trainings. And I've said to you too, like every time you host the moving on method, there's information that you add in for the next training, right? And it just keeps getting more broad, and there's so much research that goes into it that at the end of each session, I'm like, I feel like I took something away from my own co-parenting relationship. It's not just, I feel like over the last 2 years of you hosting these trainings, it's become so much more in depth and so much more information packed that you're providing these coaches with amazing tools to be able to share with their clients.
Well, I appreciate that. And I appreciate you noticing that because for me, like, I think I am so driven. I'm a lifelong learner. Like, as you know, I put myself
Mhm.
back in school. I'm always taking these trainings and certifications and learning more because I think I'm motivated by the fact that there's far too many people out there calling themselves divorce coaches,
Right.
drawing on their own experience, and then getting lost in the emotional mess of it with their clients. And I continue to educate myself to learn different ways to like separate that
Mhm.
and find research backed information and education for clients and to train our coaches so that they're not confusing their experience with being experienced, right? Like,
Right.
I mean, maybe if you've gone through like 10 divorces, you know a thing or two, but your own divorce was probably a shit show. We can all look back and say we did things we wish we didn't do, or we wish we did things
Guilty.
differently.
Yeah.
And so, I appreciate that because on the last day of coaching, on the last day of training, I always tell the coaches like if you stop here, it's not enough. Like you need a more well-rounded
Mhm.
education. So many universities online will offer like a 2-hour certification program. It's not a full master's, but it's something where you can learn. I did like the level 1 trauma and resilience certification. Mind blowing, but I can draw on that in my
Yeah.
experience. So the learning never ends.
It never ends. And I love that, on day one of training, you kind of are teaching the future coaches to really narrow down their niche, right? Who they are wanting to help. And then when they finish your training, they can kind of focus their energy and their continued education on like, okay, I really want to work on blending families or same-sex relationships and kind of getting more knowledge in those areas so they can really help their clientele.
Yeah, yeah, it's so important because you can't really, I mean, when I started, I cast a really wide net. I was like, come one, come all, I will help you. And then I realized, wait, I know what my skills are and I know what I'm good at and I know what I'm not good at. And it was
Right.
obviously, it tied in with my years of being an educator that like
Mhm.
having the experience with children, I would want to help people with their children. So you do definitely have to hone in on a niche because that's
Right.
when, even if it's like the most random thing, you're becoming an expert in that one thing. And that's what people will know you for. Anyway,
100%. And I think the other beautiful thing of getting to know these coaches though is that if we have someone reach out to us and we're like, oh, we don't think we can work with them, but this alumni member who took the Moving On Method training, they would be a really great fit. So getting to know that with our trainees is so important during training as well.
Yeah, it's become a really beautiful community and I'm proud of that. And seeing, month after month when we have our alumni meetings with our trained and certified coaches, you see like how they're coming into their own and the ideas that they're getting and the
Mhm.
motivation that they have now from having had a few clients or even just one. It's so rewarding for me. So that's why like in totality, I realized like this thing that I built, when you start something new, you're like, I wonder how this is going to land. But I'm now seeing 2 years into having developed this program, like, holy shit, this is good stuff.
It's so good. It's so good. And I feel like I love how big this community is becoming. And what's crazy is that it feels like such a huge community when you look at it from a number standpoint, but it also feels so small when we do have those alumni meetings, that it's this family of people with the same goal, but taking different approaches and having different areas of expertise.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I also like in broadening my lens a little bit in my scope and having the experience of working with men, it helps me, it helps me understand better the way a woman feels and like why men behave the way that they behave, because so many of them, it's so funny, like we all accuse men of like not having self-awareness, but if they come to work with us, like there is some level of, okay, I'm doing something wrong and I need help, which is amazing.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so many of them will come to me and say, I'm not doing this part right. And I really want to connect with my kids. And I think where women get so upset is, they'll say, oh, well, now he wants to be a dad. And it's like, well, we've held up a mirror for him. You were not good at being a
Yeah.
husband. And now he really wants to be good at something. So what if now he wants to be a good dad? That's amazing for your kids versus him not wanting to be a dad at all.
Exactly. And I think, speaking from personal experience, I was the same way, right? I was like, their dad could never XYZ. He's never done this. He hasn't done that. But I had to look in the mirror and be like, I didn't allow him to do that when we were married. I was a total control freak and it was my way or it was no way. So us getting a divorce really paved the way for him to find his own place in fatherhood. And it's not the way that I do it, but it's so beautiful because he is an amazing dad and our children are able to see that and get like the full dad that they really deserve, because I'm kind of not there like nagging and saying what he's not doing right. So I do think, when men come to us knowing like, hey, I haven't made dinner, I haven't done this, but I really want to do this for my children, and we can kind of give them the guidance and the support to do so, it really is an amazing thing.
Yeah. And part of what you said, like the control, I think we all as moms could
Yeah.
be labeled by our exes as control freaks, but that's because
Mhm.
like the majority of us, when we get separated, the kids are young. We're still in that
Yeah.
like postpartum figuring it out phase. Like every
Right.
stage gets harder than the next. So control is really the only thing that we feel connected to that's going to like mimic back to us whether or not we're a good parent, right? Like the more I worry about
Mhm.
this, the more I feel like I'm doing something right. And so I think that's part of it too, is getting the dad to recognize that maybe she wasn't trying to control you, but in trying to control the parenting, she felt better about her role as a mom. And letting go of that
Right.
control is aligned with modifying your expectations of the other parent. Instead of saying, well, they can't do this because they never have, let's take a step back and see what that really means. That means you think that because they haven't done things your way or at all, that they can't do it at all. Let's modify that. How can we change that? And modifying expectations is such a big part of understanding the moving on method.
Totally. Totally. And I think, that's something that you do such an amazing job on preparing coaches to be able to do with their clients, right? Modifying their expectations, but also like creating a plan, right? What does this look like? What are some of your goals and how can we as coaches help you achieve these goals? What guidance can we give you in order to take those steps forward?
Yes. And taking what you know about this person, like my ex is never going to be like a punctual Paul. He's just not. And so
Mhm.
I can choose to spend the next 10 years that I'm co-parenting with him fighting over every single time he's not to the minute at my
Mhm.
doorstep, right? But like I'm also overly punctual. And so where did I have to modify my expectations? Well, I had to pick my battles. If I fought with him about every single time he was going to be late or ask me twice what time he needed to be somewhere, we'd be fighting forever. So, like,
Right.
I have to take what I already know about him and remind myself that the things that bothered you in your marriage are still very much going to be there in divorce and co-parenting. They don't change. So how can we work around that?
Right.
And not
100%.
expecting, I see so many people expecting like this completely changed person from the signing of
Mhm.
the divorce papers to the next day. And it's like, no, no, that's not at all what happens. What happens is your marriage ends.
Exactly. And I think so often too, and I was guilty of this, punctual time was my ex is horrible with it. And I took it as like a personal attack, right? He's late because he's trying to
He doesn't
like
care
get
about
back at
my
me or
time.
make me
Yeah.
angry when I'm like, no, he would be late to anything. Like that has nothing to do. It's not like he's out to get me.
Time management really is a great skill to have. And it can be
Yeah.
so frustrating. Like, and when you're dealing with kids, like, let's not overlook the fact that, like, if you are dealing with somebody who is chronically late to the point where it's now infringing on your children's
Right.
bedtimes and they have school the next day, that's a different issue. But the point of this is modifying your expectations to go back to remembering like who it is that you're dealing with and how
Right.
little of the way they piss you off is showing up in a personal way for them. It's just who they are.
Yeah. Totally.
Well, I'm so excited that we are moving forward here in the moving on world with our method. Um, like I said, same great podcast, just a new name, amazing guests lined up continuously, and we have really great sponsors. Thank you to Talking Parents and Worthy. We love being able to promote to you brands that really align with our mission, which is helping people move on and co-parent in a healthy way. And Jess, I couldn't do it without you. That's the truth of that.
Well, I appreciate it. It's been fun to be along on this journey.
I agree. Happy Monday, everyone. And we are always here for you in any capacity. If you are interested in becoming a Moving On Method certified coach, our next and final training for the year is in October. You can apply on my website, michelledempsey.com. And if you just want to be coached and want to help change your approach to co-parenting, we do that too. So reach out and we'll see you next time on the Moving On Method.
Bye, everyone.